Britain's terror threat is at its highest level since 9/11, with extremists using the war in Gaza as a springboard to recruit new members.
MPs have reportedly been advised that intercepted terrorist chatter has increased. Well, we're joined now by former senior British military officer General Sir Richard Barrons and terrorism expert Dr. Evan Lawrence from the University of Central Lancashire. Let's start with you, General Barrons. Is this a frightening prospect and should we be worried?
So it's certainly serious and we should be worried, but we shouldn't be surprised that the sorts of events that we're seeing unfold in Gaza will radicalise people on both sides of the issue, where they blame the United Kingdom and its people for whatever the outcome is that they're opposed to.
Is it fair to say, though, Richard, that we are at the same level of risk as 9/11? I mean, don't get me wrong. I've said it all morning. I think it's very important that people are aware / not frightened. But are we getting confused between real terror threats and hate crimes on the streets of this country by extremists, by fanatics, that's caused this great debate and a debate that needs to be had? Is there a difference between the two? Because listen, I'm not an expert, but that's how I would see it.
I think there really is a difference between the sort of events you saw in 9/11, where you had a well-formed, well-funded terrorist organisation doing the terrible things that it did in the United States, with all the consequences that came with it, and the spread of ill feeling and hate crime on our streets. They're clearly not the same thing, but they are connected, and left unchecked, radicalisation can start with hate crime and lead to terrorism, and that's what we need to head off.
Okay. And Dr. Evan, in your experience, you're a lecturer in international relations. Just how much of an impact will the conflict in Gaza be having on the kind of increased chances of people being radicalised over here in the UK?
Well, I think it has a huge impact. What's going on in the world at the moment with the Ukraine, with Russia, with what's going on in Gaza, it all plays a part, as do the elections that are coming up here in the UK, the elections in the US. The nature of our divided society is a really big part of, as the general was saying, that base of kind of radicalization, and it kind of evolves from hate crime to terrorism, and it's a well-known pathway through radicalization. So I think that we are at a greater risk now than we have been in the past, but I think also that risk is a new normal for us, that it hasn't significantly changed in the past few years. So what we're looking at is an increase in the possibility of radicalization without actually seeing an increase, if that makes sense.
And so, Richard, could you just talk us through what an increase in threat level actually looks like, what it means, what changes for the authorities or for the security services once that threat level has been officially increased?
Well, it'll start with intelligence that an individual or groups are intending to carry out a terror attack, whether it's in this country or against British interests abroad. And that intelligence then leads to work to reduce the opportunity for that group to carry out a terrorist act. So that's about protecting things and also investing in investigation to make sure they bear down on the organisations and try and catch them before they're able to carry out whatever it is they're planning to do. So it requires more vigilance, it requires more investigation, and it also requires the general public to be alert to the risk, because they can be the eyes and ears of their own security service in a very helpful way.
It's a very interesting question, though, Nick, isn't it? Because you hear about those different levels, and it's great, because I don't know what those different levels are, but it's that old question. If you tell people it's increased, does that create more problem? Does it even, I mean, I could be totally wrong here, does it say to the extremists, the lone wolves? I took your point about the groups, but so many of what we've seen over the last couple of years have been lone wolves, and how you're supposed to legislate with somebody that walks into a building with a bomb strapped to a rucksack, I've no idea. But one wonders, by saying it, are we fueling it, Dr. Evan? Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is certainly something in the idea of labeling it. And as soon as you start labeling it as terrorism, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But, when we talk about the threat levels, we've been at the same threat level for years. So how useful that is to the general public and what that says to lone wolves, I don't know. I don't think that that's overly relevant in the context of radicalization. But I think the normalization of being at a high threat level is relevant and is problematic.
So, Richard, we heard overnight that Kamala Harris, Vice President in America, has called for a ceasefire in Gaza. How important do you think that is in terms of the potential for, as we've been discussing, radicalisation of people over here in the UK? Do you think a permanent and sustainable ceasefire would therefore decrease the risk?
She only wanted one for 6 weeks, though, didn't she? Did you read that? Yeah.
To begin with, yeah.
So I think a ceasefire in Gaza may take some of the steam out of the drama that's unfolding now, and the terrible humanitarian catastrophe we're all witnessing. But actually, it'll only take the steam out until we know what the future of Gaza is. What is the way out of this mess in Gaza that takes the Palestinian people to a better place? If you manage to achieve that, then some people will be de-radicalized. And if the ceasefire just leads to more oppression, then it'll have had no real long-term difference at all that's beneficial.
It's a very interesting topic. Both of you, thank you so much indeed. We really appreciate you being part of the show this morning. It's one of those subjects that it's difficult, isn't it? Because the question that I said, if you talk about it, are you fueling it? If you don't talk about it, you're sticking your head in the sand.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is give people more fear than is necessary, because at the end of the day, there's very little you can do about it.